Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into the greatest time of the year. We got NFL schedule. We got the Orioles at home all week. Luke's at the ballpark. I will be at the racetrack. I will be at the Alibi breakfast where we make a lot of excuses, but there'll be no excuses on Friday. We'll be having the delicious crab cake at Fadley's, courtesy of our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'll be giving away the Pac-Man scratch-offs. There is a rumor because of rain, we're moving the Crab Derby, so I'm going to hold the Crab Derby sign up. It is no longer Wednesday. It is now Friday due to inclement weather. So on Friday, we're going to be doing the Crab Derby with the crab cake and shrimp salad. I'm trying to recruit Dave Sims from the Mariners to come down and hang out with us. This guy's in town all weekend. He's going to get real busy once he gets here, so we're getting him earlier in the week. And if you listen to this on Friday or Saturday, there may be some updates. But Kenny Rice has been covering a great game of horse racing for a long, long time. I've never had him on. It is a pleasure to have you aboard, and a pleasure even more so to come to you in the great state of Kentucky. We're behind you. I see the Final Four poster. My dad got money orders because my dad was wanted to go to the Final Four so bad that when the tickets went on sale back in 1984, my dad did because we were ready to. We didn't win the lottery. We didn't make it to Rupp Arena, but I love that poster behind you, Kenny Rice.
Oh, thank you. Great to be with you, by the way. And I got that poster. I swiped it on my way out. I was working for the ABC affiliate in Lexington, and we were covering the Final Four, and it was there. And actually, a guy said, "Hey, you want this?" I said, "Sure." So one of the camera guys from CBS gave it to me. So I was fortunate. I've seen two of the great games. I saw obviously that game, and then I saw Duke beat Kentucky in '92. So in my basketball life, which I love that sport, I've seen two of the greatest college games ever.
Well, this was at a time, so I was born in 68, so I was, at the tender age, high school, whatever. But during that whole period, Lefty, and then more than that, like 83 at the pit with Valvano and
Yeah.
Magic and Larry, that poster's awesome, by the way. But we got a horse race here this week. You're coming in for NBC, and I admire the coverage every year. I've been to several derbies, not since they built that giant paddock down there, but I watch
Yeah.
the coverage, and I have Don on every year, and I talk about what that entails. Derby and the Derby winner coming here, and we're at a crossroads with Preakness where things really are going to change. And I've been on the air 32 years, and every year it's, are we going to save it? Are we going to keep it? At least we have some certainty. And this week, I feel like we have a really good race.
We'll have a great race shaping up. I mean, better than most people thought, to be honest. 2 weeks ago, they would have never guessed that. Now, obviously, Mystic Dan comes in. That seals the deal when the Derby winner comes on. There's been 2 out of the last 5 years where the Derby winner didn't come up. But also, I think having a legitimate horse like Catching Freedom, who finished 4th in the Derby, come in was an added bonus to it. And then, of course, Baffert's coming in with the favorite in Muth. Imagination's got an outside shot, but Muth may be the best 3-year-old in the country. But that's the beauty of it. Now we'll see the showdown, because I love the Preakness because it's the litmus test. We know who won the Derby. Now, is that horse one of those horses that had that moment and we won't hear from him again, like Mage last year? Or will Mystic Dan go on? It'll all be settled at Pimlico. And that's the beauty of the Preakness for me.
We bring the stars together here, right? Whether it's Chad Browns and the D. Waynes and Baffert. I mean, so much pageantry amongst these great trainers to win this race. Bob always speaks through the crab cakes and loving Baltimore, and his horses run well here. And it's old school, even though half of it's condemned and it's going to be going away in a couple of years. But this has been a place where the stars sort of shine. The stars of the sport are usually, with you guys after we're giving the interviews, because this is a race where this is a tough race 2 weeks after the Derby to win.
It is. It's an incredibly tough race, and that's why a lot of people are backing off running in it. To be honest, it's not like the old days. But now, the old days, a horse would come into the Kentucky Derby, and if they didn't have 4 or 5 races, maybe 6 races, something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. How come the horse hasn't run more? Or now horse comes in 1 race, 2 race, maybe not even a race. And just training up to it. And you don't think like he used to anymore. Trainers don't. And that's the same way. Nobody complained when it used to be a 2-week turnaround. They started complaining, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago or so, right about the time trainers started changing their style. But one time, you were thought, geez, what's wrong with me if I'm not going to run the Preakness? I won the Derby. Of course I'm going. There's no hesitation. Now everybody takes a step back to see. So a lot has changed in horse racing. We know that with baseball. I got to be honest, I wasn't too fired up about putting the guy on second base to start extra innings. but I think it's worked out really well. I mean, I love the fact that that's the way it is.
Well, I'd say this, Kenny. We have Jim Palmer that calls the games here in Baltimore
Oh yeah,
and we're, Orioles are high. You're going to want to go to a Birds game this weekend. The first place Orioles at town against the Mariners. I would say to you, it's just like that, where Palmer, 4-man rotation, 350 innings, 8 innings a
yeah,
night, 12 if you need him for that, whatever you need.
yeah,
We've thought differently about pitching, and that's really that for our town especially, that's the perfect segue into where they've been with this. That maybe in a different world we'll get a little more of an extension in this thing, and I know that's been
yeah,
talked about. But the thing about racing, when it comes in here for once a year and it sort of helicopters in, understanding that there's not really the governing body, right? Like trying to explain
right.
to people how Baffert can run a horse this week and Churchill won't let him around, and how insane that is to people outside the industry.
Toughest thing to ever explain is how horse racing eats its young, and it has now for decades. There's the old guard that is still old enough and still clinging on to the old days, and they're not looking. They're not looking to have the pitcher speed up on the mound. They don't want that. They want to keep it the same way. Well, the same way is not bringing in a real big younger audience like they want. They've been passed up by Ultimate Fighting Championship as far as viewership. And I think one of the reasons is they don't put a lot of emphasis on their human stars, like the trainers, like the jockeys, because even no matter how great a horse is, uh, you're only going to see him for maybe 2 years max, probably just for 1 year because the breeding industry is so lucrative. So, so
They don't
that's
make
on
them
the
like
table.
Cigar anymore, right?
They don't make them, and they don't want to. It's all in the breeding now. I mean, and it's hard to turn down the crazy money they turn down. Uh, I mean, when they talk about like $70 million, $80 million syndication, as we saw for Justify, the Triple Crown winner, even among rich folk, 70, $80 million is a lot of money. So,
And that's why they're
they're
in the
going to
game.
go there.
They
That's it.
pageantry and all that, but this is an expensive game to be involved
It
in,
is. It
and
is.
you can lose a lot of money in this game, right? But more people lose than win out of love for the creatures and love for the sport and love for the action. But
Yeah.
these are volatile creatures, as we find out when PETA shows. Like all of that stuff that happens around the animals,
Yeah.
concern for the animals is paramount. It has to be.
That's one of the things that makes it tough to sell racing to some people. The other is the gambling part of it. Not everybody wants to go out there and gamble. Okay, I mean, it's with a click of a phone now, you can bet on a ball game. While you're in the middle of the inning, you can make changes in your bets. But not everybody's into that. That's one of the toughest sells for horse racing. But I thought what horse racing really needs is at least have like a 5-person council and include at least 2 people that are actually trainers, retired jockeys, and maybe even a businessman who has been an owner, who maybe still is an owner, and have them make decisions. But here's the thing: New York's never going to agree with Kentucky, with California, with Arkansas, with Maryland, with Florida. They're not always going to come together. And that's why the Triple Crown, I don't know if it's ever going to change. I think perfectly it would be first Saturday in May, first Saturday in June, first Saturday in July. But I don't think New York will ever move it. And they'll talk about tradition. Well, this year they're going to run a 1.25 mile Belmont, which is not tradition. It's 1.5 miles. But because they've had to change venues with Saratoga. Now, common sense would say, okay, you know what? We're making some changes. Let's think about making some others. But look, there's a lot of rich people in the game, as you know, and rich people generally tend to do what they want to do because they can afford to do it in many ways. And that's why horse racing is the way it is. And that's why it's really hard to explain how Bob Baffert could run in every racetrack in America that's not owned by, in the world, actually, that's not owned by Churchill Downs. I've tried to explain it to people, and really it just kind of goes around and round, and they'll never be a commissioner. They will never be a commissioner. With the best hope is that you might be able to get a committee together, but a small committee. You don't need a 25-person committee out there making decisions.
Well, we've had committee upon committee here.
Yeah.
Kenny, I don't know how long you've been coming in to the Preakness. I guess probably, I'm 40 years into this Preakness thing here. Kenny Rice is reporter on the 149th Preakness Stakes show. I'm reading the plugs this Saturday at 4:30 p.m. on NBC and Peacock. But they'll be in
Wow.
here and available and doing all that. And Larry's going to come on. We're going to talk to him and Donna.
Oh, yeah.
So I got Baffert on. I haven't talked to Bob in 2 years. Bob talked to me right before the ban happened. Like literally, we did a thing for Monday that never aired because on Sunday the axe went down the week after the Derby a couple years ago, and I haven't had Bob on since, and I'm about to have Bob on later today. What do you say to people and say, why don't they let Bob in, Churchill? What is the reporter line on that? What should I be telling people?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's a personal issue. I mean, it really got personal. I mean, that's why it's a 3-year deal now, and I think that's it. What I think is the best thing is that Bob has moved on, and good for him. He's moved on. It's over. It's happened. It's done with. The Preakness is a big goal of his, as it was last year when he won. I think he's got a great shot at winning again this time. And I really don't know I don't know if Bob wants to say any more about it. I don't know if there is anything. I don't know if Churchill wants to say any more about it, because as you can see, like you say, it was so convoluted, and here's the trouble with racing, is some rules can be changed. I mean, imagine if suddenly, like, you move into the 7th inning, and all of a sudden 3 balls will put your man on first base, not 4 anymore is tradition. Go, what? Who changed that? What happened? Well, on a Wednesday we changed that rule. Games played Thursday on. Now that sounds absurd, but that's a lot of things, especially with medication in horse racing. You can use certain medications on your horse, say up to 48 hours before a race. If you happen to use that medication 45 hours or 40 hours before the race, then it becomes illegal. Does that make sense? Is that hard to explain? It is for me, and I've been covering this sport for a long time, but people go, well, that doesn't make sense either. I said, well, it's about like changing the pitch count in the 7th inning of a baseball game. Nobody would, in the middle of the week, certain rules for certain places. Certain things in California are more acceptable than in Kentucky, than in New York, than in Maryland, Arkansas. And again, we get back to the fact that while they had these new rules for safety and the Horseman Integrity Act, which is all commendable, they need to tweak some stuff. But again, they're making some progress in those areas. The big area is just trying to get everybody to come together in a common sense world where they better realize that, horse racing relies a lot on other gambling. Most of these places are relying on gambling revenue brought in from casinos at a lot of racetracks now all over America, even some big racetracks in big states. So, they better realize that we got to come together and have some kind of agreement so we don't have a situation like this ever again with the most recognizable face in all of horse racing.
Kenny Rice is here. He will physically be here in Baltimore this weekend.
Yeah.
Hopefully not running between the raindrops. We got to get the right weather here. I'm on the inside of the Maryland thing here, and I'm an old newspaper reporter from the 1980s and running out to the track with Clem Florio and seeing Beyer before the speed figures were out there, and Bowie and Laurel. I remember when casinos were going to save here, we were going to have slots, and then we weren't. So you've been at this from the very beginning, as was Marty McGee and Dick Girardi and all my other horse racing goons out there.
Yeah.
What do you make from afar, from being in Kentucky, from being in other places, from seeing what Magna came in here and did with Stronach, and then Belinda, and then there's Bruno Mars, and it's an EDM show, and we had the running of the urinals here. I was guilty of being of that tender age out there when we drank a lot of beer and hauled in fried chicken and did all that stuff. They've tried to change the race in so many ways, but everything I've gotten in recent days and weeks here, I've had David Richardson on, Alan Foreman, everybody here. This is about to change dramatically, and it's got to be for the better because half the track won't be condemned anymore. They're going to run a little bit down in Laurel, and you even mentioned what's going on at Belmont right now with that racing is trying to sort of work this out that 5 years from now we find a bigger, better everything in this Triple Crown. Baltimore and Pimlico and Maryland, what do you know from afar, and how do you gauge it from distant eyes?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I remember one of my first reports I ever did for NBC on a Triple Crown show around 2001, 2002. I've been with them for 25 years, and I remember just after we got the Triple Crown, I think one of my first reports, we talked about how the Colts moved out in darkness of night to go to Indianapolis, and how once again would change be coming. What's going to happen with Pimlico? So what is that? 22, 23 years, 24 years. We seem like we've always had some kind of what's going to happen to Pimlico next. And still from the outside, I get that question from people here in Kentucky and really other places. Pimlico, it's got to stay in Maryland, doesn't it? So yeah, it's got to stay in Maryland. I mean, that is the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown would not exist if it's not the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. It's got to be those three things. But again, Maryland, like you say, they need to step up their game. It appears that they're going to step up. They do some nice things. Their entertainment, I got to be honest, has improved tremendously. Bring in Bruno Mars last year, and and some of the people they've been bringing in recent years, it's become almost like a concert. It is, and then there's a horse race attached to the concert, if that makes any sense. Whereas the Derby, really, the Derby is a whole event of like a whole 2 weeks wrapped around a 2-minute horse race. So, I understand that you've got to go out there and you've got to get your celebrities in. You've got to make it entertaining, especially from the younger people. But it's like you say, how do you get that balance? How do you get that mix in there? It appears from what I hear that Maryland's heading in that direction. I hope so, because really there's nothing more enjoyable than covering the Preakness. The Derby's a big event. I'm a Kentuckian. I love to cover the Derby. It was exciting. Kenny McPeak, I've known him since he was a kid too. And so I was very happy for him when he won it. But now we come to Baltimore and it's just so relaxed and it's such a family kind of atmosphere and so welcoming that, I love to cover the Preakness. First one I covered was in 1990 for ESPN. I was one of their stringer reporters then. So it's Maryland's always had a special place. And I hope that in the next couple of 3 years, the changes that I keep hearing about, that you certainly know more about, will all come to fruition, and the racetrack will look great and as it needs to, other than a coat of paint here and there. And the tradition will continue because it's a great race. And like I say, it's the most pivotal race. That defines. Look at how many horses that never won again after they won the Derby. We got a little spoiled there with California Chrome and then a couple of Triple Crown winners. But it's not an automatic that you're going to just come on into Baltimore and win. And that's what I think is the beauty and the essence of the Preakness. As from a sports standpoint, is this Derby winner for real? Are we going to see Mystic Dan make a big case? If he doesn't win it, is he going to run a great race at least?
Kenny, the Baltimore side of this is always fascinating to me because everybody comes in and they praise it and they love it up and they give it all that respect. And I'm 55. I went to my first Preakness probably 82, 81, 82 Swale, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And, through Spend a Buck, and I joke with Dick Girardi, that sucked him out of the state to Pennsylvania. We never got him back, all these years later. And through all of the years, the deterioration of the race and the ownership, and even as a media member, I worked at the Baltimore Sun, and they would send apple pies and pumpkin pies over to cover the races and stuff. And it just sort of, when Frank DeFrancis left, things changed, and we're going back 4 decades here, right? But as a child in the 70s, and maybe this was because my dad was never a horse racing guy. My dad was baseball, football. My dad never gambled, right? So so horse racing didn't play into him, but he loved Secretariat and Seattle Slew and Affirmed and Aladar. Like, that's my childhood. And I remember it being like, oh, one day I'll get to go to a Preakness as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went out there, got drunk like everybody, would have bet $2, whatever, got a sunburn, did all the rites of passage, met girls, did all that stuff in the 80s. But it was the parties that week. It was bands in town. It was celebrities coming to town, trying to bootleg the Barnstable Brown ball, trying to bootleg the Oaks and doing the Black Eyes. But then I went to Kentucky in 96, 7, 8, 9, and I did all of that there with a hat on, like doing the right thing and having fun and eating all the Derby pie and the brown. What's the brown? What do they call it?
The hot brown.
Hot brown. Yeah. So it's been and I fell in love with Louisville, and I kid Chris Redman about Valhalla, and they're playing golf down there this weekend, a little tournament they're having in Louisville. But there's something about the way Louisville, small town, southern town, embracing the race and making it about more than a minute and 50 seconds, about more than just the track that day, about more than, it's in the bloodstream of Kentucky. And we're trying to figure that out here. And because it needs to be more than what you've seen it be the last 25 years, right? Because I remember it being more than that before ESPN sent you in 1990, and you've been doing it a long time. Finding its way as a celebration here is, you need to steal what they're doing in Kentucky, literally, because it's a magical thing in your community, right?
Yeah, and one of the things is, and I know it's just, Kentucky just has 1 year on Maryland in this 150th Derby, 149th Preakness, so it's there. But it really goes back to the whole promotion of a guy named Matt Wynn, who brought some top riders in like Grantland Rice and these guys, wined them and dined them back in the 30s, 40s, when people got their information from newspapers. When boxing and baseball.
Let's sell it. Let's make it a Super Bowl, right?
And they sold it back then. And that's the tradition. And nobody else has done that. They didn't do that for the Preakness. They didn't do that for the Belmont. But he was bringing in all the top riders all over the world. All over the nation. and they would write, and hey, you got to come to Kentucky and see this, because they came and they ate and they drank and they ran around and who knows what else they did.
And there's
But
beautiful ponies too. You know what I
yeah,
mean? There's a
yeah,
reason to
and
come, right?
they said you got to see it. The people are nice, great Southern hospitality, and the race is like nothing else you've seen. People read that, and so generations grew up like that. Like most of us grew up rooting for ball teams. I grew up rooting for the St. Louis Cardinals because my grandfather did, and my dad went to see Stan Musial. So I grew up watching the Cardinals and rooting for them. It's tradition. There's people that only go to the Derby, even that live in Kentucky, because everybody in the state of Kentucky doesn't grow up in horse racing. I didn't grow up in this world. I grew up with football, baseball, basketball, boxing. Those were the sports I watched when I was a kid, and we'd go to events with my dad, and my uncle. But we never went
I
to
never
horse
spent a
races.
day at the horse race at the track with my father.
Yeah.
I spent 1,000 days at a baseball game with my father.
Yeah.
Or
Well, I'm the
basketball,
same way.
hockey, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. But I went, and because I actually got into it, because when I went to local TV in Lexington, just out of college, not everybody was covering horse racing, surprisingly. So that's kind of led a long road to get to where I am now. And the whole point of this, and I'll try to be a little more brief, is I think that the biggest thing is going to that history. They did a great job selling it. And so it carried over. And there's people that like the Derby that are not even sure about that. The other thing is, in Louisville, they don't have the Orioles. They don't have the Ravens. They don't have the Capitals just up the road, or the Wizards. They've got college basketball, college football in Louisville, and horses. It's a big deal at Churchill Downs that also helps that way. They don't have to worry about, are we going to the racetrack? Are we going to the series this weekend because the Red Sox are in town? That's not a worry at Louisville. They've got one game, and that's the Kentucky Derby for basically the entire month of April leading up to the first Saturday in May. And they don't have competition from any other sport.
Well, it does speak to the fact the Orioles are home this week and who used to own the team and what restriction. But the fact that they're home, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it can't be great pulling more people to the ballpark for the race itself and making the race the only thing that matters in a weekend here. And I have felt that in Kentucky, and I've always been so damn envious. You know what I mean? Like, just like literally, you know what I mean? It's just like from the Oaks straight on through. I'm just a little envious. Kenny Rice is here. He is a reporter on the 149th Preakness Stakes Show this Saturday at 4:30 Eastern for all of you out there on NBC and Peacock, and nobody covering the races better. So handicap it for me a little bit here. Going in early, weather, this, that. Obviously, just a really interesting field, and I think interesting anytime the Kentucky Derby favorites or winner's not going to be favored.
Yeah, and I think that's probably legit to make Muth the favorite. He's probably the best 3-year-old out there right now. And that's the beauty. We've got the East-West meeting in Maryland. That's perfect. I think he'll go out there like most of the BAFTA horses, come and get me. He'll set an early pace like National Treasure did last year. I don't know how blistering it would be, but he'll be out there as one of the front runners, if not the front runner. I don't think Mystic Dan, Brian Hernandez, is not going to let him get too far away from him. I don't think, Kenny McPeak will say that. And I believe Catching Freedom is going to be in the game a little more. He's not going to be making a big last to first run. I don't know if he's, it's only 9 horses, so he doesn't really have to navigate that much. But I think he'll be in the mix a little more on the backside than probably we'll see. And the horse that interests me is Copper Tax, who has won there. And you kind of wonder if, Capuano's been around a long time, and this horse is, I think it's deputed testimony in 1983. I hope I'm right on that number. I know it was deputed testimony. The last local horse to win this Preakness. So, he's kind of an interesting horse. I don't think he's just like a sentimental horse. I think he factors into the mix there. And if you want to get sentimental, then Wayne Lucas will give you 2. I don't know about Just Steel wheeling back in 2 weeks. I think Wayne wanted to be in this. But that Seize the Gray, who won the Pat Day Mile, I think he's another horse that's going to be out there challenging early. And coming down the stretch, I think the 3 horses to watch, Muth is going to be in front. Mystic Dan and Catching Freedom are going to be right behind him. And I think that's going to be pretty much a 1-2-3.
Well, I'll tell you what, they got baseball on all weekend. We got NBA playoffs, NFL schedule. But I'll tell you what, only one place has the Kentucky Derby winner. That's true. Only one place has the Triple Crown alive, and it's right here in Baltimore at Old Hilltop. Lots of changes here. We've been talking about it all week long, talking horse racing during one of my favorite weeks of the year, because I've always been a believer that this can get bigger and better. And I think much like the Orioles under new ownership, it can get so much bigger and better, Kenny Rice, that I now know through 20 minutes you're a Cardinals fan, that when the Orioles face off against the Cardinals in World Series action, I'm going to bring you back on the program and we can sit here and hash it out about the American League and the National League. But this Orioles thing really has been. I clearly you're a baseball guy. What's going on here is really. We've waited a long time. You can't wipe the smile off my face.
I don't blame you. Honestly, of course, last year was not a year to talk about the Cardinals, but I do enjoy seeing new teams in the mix. I enjoy seeing the Rangers win. Only because I just think it's nice to have things mixed up a little bit. Bring some new faces in. I like that. And then I like that with all the sports, but especially baseball. I like seeing, the Reds. I'm only 70 miles from Cincinnati, so I do go to a few Reds games. They can't hit a lick right now. I don't know the pitching's caught up with them or what, but they looked like a team last year that's going to be contending for the Central this year. But De La Cruz is a fun guy to watch, so I like to keep up with it. And they 90s than the last time they did anything, so I have a little sentimental thing for them too. I watch them enough that I root for them when they're not playing the Cardinals.
Well, I went to Cincinnati with Marty McGee. He and I ate hot dogs and drank beer. Some of us drank more than others. Some of us gambled more than others from our seat. But we did a little Free the Birds thing. Even had some Grater's ice cream there in Cincinnati. And I abstained from that chili because it's not for me, Kenny.
No. Well, you got to pace yourself on that or you will not make it to the fifth or sixth inning. Yeah, no, I back off that myself, But I love Camden Yard. I actually went, Moss and Bailey, the three of us went to a game. Lafitte was still working with Lafitte Pink Eye. We all went to a game, probably 6-7 years ago at Camden Yard. It was just great. So I don't know.
They're now under new ownership, Kenny. So, things have improved here, my friend,
Yes. Yeah. Great baseball city. I grew up, I remember watching Brooks Robinson. And a good friend of mine was a center fielder on the 83 Orioles team where I rooted hard for them. John T-Bone Shelby. He's a Lexington guy. I've known John for 30-some years.
Oh, man, that's awesome, man. Now you're bringing up 37. You're bringing up the old school here now. That's my era, right?
So I rooted hard for those Orioles in 83. And then, of course, John went on and was a starter for the Dodgers in 88 in center field and was a longtime coach with them. And when I used to work out in Los Angeles doing a show out there, a mixed martial arts show, by the way, for Mark Cuban, several years ago, I'd squeeze in some Dodger games and see him. It was a lot of fun
and nothing like a Dodger dog in Chavez Ravine, right? Like
it's the best. Honestly, it's the best, isn't it? I don't know why it's so good. It's just so good.
I did 30 ballparks in 30 days. My wife's a 2-time leukemia survivor, and in 14, when she survived the first time, we dreamed of doing this. We chased the Northern Lights last week in Spokane. It's a long story, but we did 30 ballparks in 30 days, and everybody comes up and says, well, which one was the best one? And like, I had been to 25 of them, or I've been to most of them over the course of my career as well. It's new ballparks, but I've been to all the old ones too. But to me, Royal Stadium, and I don't really love the renovation there, but I love a night at Royal Stadium. But to me, Dodger Stadium still like timeless, ageless, perfect, as I say,
Yeah, I agree with that. Isn't it amazing that Dodger Stadium and Angel Stadium are the third and fourth oldest behind Fenway and Wrigley?
I bet it'd be crazy to think about Camden Yards being probably among the 10 oldest now, right? Like,
they probably are.
Yeah.
Everybody, we don't have our luxury boxes we've outgrown them in the last 7 years. We need a new stadium. It's fascinating to me.
Well, we're going to fix the racetrack first. We've already given $600 million to the football owner, $600 million to the baseball owner. We'll figure out the racetrack. Kenny Rice is going to be here doing it all for the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes. He and many of his colleagues from NBC are going to be coming on. Big thanks to Dan Masonson for the assist in finding you, a fellow sportsman. I've always wanted to have you on the show. It's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, bud.
Hey, listen, anytime. I really love this. I'll see you at the track, okay?
I'll see. Yeah, I'll be there at the alibi breakfast looking for excuses. So find me. I'll be the guy with the long hair and the funny hat. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. One reminder, we have moved the Crab Derby from Wednesday to Friday. So if you are hearing this before Friday, come on down. Weather pending Friday morning. We'll be doing the show at Fadley's as well, giving away the Pac-Man scratch-offs from the Maryland Lottery. Feel lucky? I do too. It's Preakness weekend. Stay with us.